Hello everyone, my name is Mohammed. This is my project for CSC 110 Fall 2016. So, for this project, uh, these are the following guidelines and explanations that we are to follow. And I'm just going to go over it just to give you an idea of what this project is based on. So, each of you will choose one of the 13 square tiling patterns A through M on the next several pages, which we currently don't have. But no more than 2 students to a pattern, first come, first served. Each page shows a different pattern. Each pattern has a square shape and has 2 or 3 colors. The background square grid is for reference only. Do not draw the background grid. And I'll show you what he means about that in the next couple slides. The project is to print a 4x4 square, each square of which is the repeat pattern, and where colors alternate from square to square along both the rows and columns, somewhat like a chessboard. You can alternate colors by using the same colors in each square, but shifting which colors are used in which pattern areas. Or you can use entirely different colors from square to square. For most of the patterns, the repeat pattern you use would just be the pattern shown. For several of the patterns, the repeat pattern you use would be the subset of the pattern shown by 4 arrows, which indicate the corners of the square selecting the repeat pattern. In this case, my pattern doesn't show 4 arrows, it goes straight to the point. You must use helper functions for this project. Make sure your functions include size and color parameters. This will allow you to scale their size and change the colors of the pattern that the Turtle module generates. So, submissions, when we submit your Python code, grading will include writing easy to read and command code. Make sure you use helper functions. Each function must have a triple quote doc string summarizing what the function does. Add comments to clarify code. Your code should be easy to explain. Output generated by your code. This will be the 4x4 square generated with your code using the Turtle module. A PowerPoint presentation, which we're currently doing. For your code, the PowerPoint presentation should include a YouTube link to a 10 to 15 minute video of you using the PowerPoint presentation and an on-screen recorder to explain your code. That's obviously what we're doing now. Due date is Wednesday before finals week. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. So this right here is my pattern, which is G, and the tile squares he was talking about are these small squares that surround the whole pattern. There for reference. Okay, so my pattern has 2 squares in the middle. This is the first square, and then the second square rotates, and it has triangular edges on the sides. Then we go on. This center part is the third square, and the outer part is the fourth square. And these spaces in between this triangular part cut through both the middle and outer squares. So this is my pattern explanation. Pattern G has 2 squares in the middle. The second square rotates roughly about 45 degrees so that it can make the shape it does with triangles on each side of the first square. Then it has an outer square that rotates around the 2 center squares. On the outer squares, it has an opening on every side where the second square's corners, which the triangular part is pointing up, which was what I was showing you earlier. This is my code's info. So whenever you're working with turtle module, you should always start off by importing the turtle, which I'll show you in my code. I started off by importing the turtle and math module. I imported the math module because I used math. My code doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it this way, but I found it convenient. I started off by setting up my screen and the color I wanted the screen to be and what I wanted to call my turtle. In my case, I just used test as the turtle, which is just basic, but you can name your turtle anything you want. I have 4 helper functions that help my code to form and make the tile pattern it does. In 3 of my helper functions, I have for loops in order to make the function repeat itself a certain number of times. My last helper function, which is just main, it calls out the previous helper functions with its right coordinates and colors. And that's it for the PowerPoint. Let's get this out of the way and bring code up. So this right here is the beginning of my code. Like I was saying, import turtle and math. This is where you import the turtle, and then you set up your screen, the color you want your screen to be, what do you want to call your turtle, the color of the turtle, and in my case I just set the speed to 0 so that it can draw it faster. So my first helper function, I just define it as square with x, y, size, and angle coordinates. In this function, it sets up the x, y, size, angle, and color of the first 2 squares that are in the middle or inner square. I use these parameters and I set the angle to 0 in order for it to start in the middle. And I used test fill color, which fills in the color of the squares that I used. And I used the for loop here, which makes the edges of the square. In my second helper function, I used pattern with the coordinates of x, y, and color. This function makes sure that the outer squares are formed and called out to their right coordinate positions to make the square and to make the spaces in between the triangular part of the pattern. And what I mean about that is we have the 2 center squares, one that rotates to the right about 45 degrees to make those triangular edges on the first square, and the spaces in between, which are the 2 outer squares, that gives the spaces on each of the edges of the triangular part of the second square. And for my third helper function, it's just pattern row. So obviously it just gives you the coordinates and the color of the triangle, the squares that you want in the rows. So it alternates between the color change and calls out the pattern function to its position so that the tile pattern alternates from each tile pattern. I use the for loop here so that it can draw an 8 by 8, and in another case a 4 by 4. And in this helper function right here, pattern repeat, the pattern repeat is so that the X and Y and colors 1 and 2 can alternate between each other, which is so that it can go from so it can go by the AB color coordination. So it changes between the two colors that I end up calling it for. And my last function, which is just main, it just calls out the previous function so that it may draw the pattern in its right positions. So I set up my square, start off the coordinates with 0, 0, and then my pattern repeat, I set the coordinates to negative 270 and 150 so that it may start up on the top left corner. And the two colors I used for my pattern is dim gray and deep sky blue. So when we run this function, let's run this and see what it does. And there it is. It's alternating between two colors, which is the dim gray and the sky blue. It starts off from the top left and goes down and picks pen up and goes back up and repeats that until it fills up the whole page, pretty much. It's about a little bit over halfway through. Should be finishing up soon. And there you go. This is my pattern. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.